You are recognized for your 4 minutes.
To my colleagues, good afternoon to the testifiers, good afternoon to the people of the territory. Director Degazon, the question I would like to know, what are some of the safeguards that you have in place to protect the data that you do collect? Because it's so important that we do have relevant data and that's accurate.
So most of our data is secondary data. Our data is not data that's specific, like sensitive, like social securities, etc. So when you have secondary data, it's not data that needs all this extra set of security. However, as we move on, you see right now we are discussing VIVIS, and VIVIS possibly becoming under the Bureau of Economic Research as one of the ideas that may be out there, which we strongly support. That's when we would have to really make sure that we improve our systems to be able to protect it. And when you adopt systems like those or information like that, you usually have a team where they make specific recommendations and we put it in place. As we grow, you strengthen your system. But for now, we work on secondary data. That's public data that is not considered very private.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. As you referred to VIVIS, I was the senator on that floor that day that kept pushing the issue for it to be under your section of the government, under the governor's office. I think I put in legislation to amend it so it can go there. My colleague, we were working together. Hopefully, if we get it done, it'll go underneath this bureau because I think that's the best place for it. What I want to know is, do you think that as a bureau you are capable or strong enough and can stand alone as an agency unto yourself?
Well, to be honest, I think that is really how it should be situated. And I would like to have Dr. Mills speak on this. And the reason why Dr. Mills ran this agency successfully for many years, and the fact that we are able to have her as part of our team as a chief economist speaks to the wit and wisdom of where we want to take the agency. I want her to be able to speak on that. I think that she would have a good historical narrative, even to bring us to the present. Dr. Mills?
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Lawrence Mills, and as Director Degazon stated, I was the director for the Bureau for quite a long time, in fact, 15 years or so. And one of the things that we pushed even then was for the Bureau to become a central statistics office, where, in fact, this is happening in many countries, in which we collect not just economic data, but all types of data on the territory. So in fact, I think we are well behind in terms of establishing such an office. The Bureau is more than capable of handling the types of needs and that are required, frankly. And that is one of the things I certainly would like to see, and we are pushing.
Well, as a senator, I would like to see that as well. That's the reason why I asked the question, to see what your stance is, because I think certain specific bureaus need to be standalone and outside of underneath specifically, I think this is under the office of the governor, and I think it needs to be outside of it. That is my personal choice for this agency, because I think the information that you guys collect is very vital to our economic growth and stability, and it needs to be standalone. Speaking about tourism, one of the things that you guys collect, and I've utilized your data to really see the numbers when it comes to tourists and various visitors to the territory. What have you seen across the board since the pandemic when it comes to tourism here in the territory, just to educate me and the public as well?
Dr. Mills, you want to answer that as the economist working with the data?
Oh yeah, we have begun some preliminary assessment of the tourism data, and Vika, I'll have you jump in, or Benicia, with some of the numbers. And the tourism sector, as we know, was the sector that was heavily impacted by the pandemic. But what we have observed, of course, we had no cruise ships for quite a while. Air arrivals were practically down to hardly any in numbers. But those numbers, we are beginning to see some uptick in those numbers. And we have good reasons to believe that as we head out into 2022, we are going to be right back on track as to where we were, at least when it comes to air arrivals, where we were pre-pandemic. Benicia or Bika, do you want to share some of the numbers that we can, to demonstrate that in fact we may be, when it comes to air arrivals, we may already be there?
Good afternoon. As far as air arrivals go, we are up we are up 109.2%. Last year, September, we was at 297,773. And this year we're up to 600,022,825. For cruise arrivals, we had no cruise arrivals, as we know, but right now we are at 30,194, but last year we was at 44,2027. But we understand why that is that right now, because we didn't have any cruise arrivals. But as we stand, cruise arrivals are at a all-time, it's going up and everything is looking up in terms of that. In hotels, hotels are showing a really good uptick. However, we know that this is not the true reflection of hotel data, because we have the introduction of Airbnb into the territory. And right now, the Bureau is working on gathering Airbnb data and generating reports so we could start reporting those numbers. Biko, do you want to elaborate on that?
Yeah, so one thing that Biko McMillan, Senior Policy Analyst. One thing that we noted in the Revenue Estimating Conference this summer was that so many of our tourism indicators are looking at or above pre-pandemic levels, and so that's a really good thing. And so economically we're kind of coming back. But as far as Airbnb data goes, I think that's one of the struggles that we have, and we discussed this in one of the past Senate hearings, is that those newer private lodging establishments aren't always sharing data with us. And so the struggle right now is just to figure out the framework for those businesses between them and the Virgin Islands, just how to, make sure that we can get the data that we need so that we can support them and support our own policies.
Okay. So between Department of Licensing and Consumer Affairs, where you could potentially get a number, because I believe these Airbnbs, I think the last time they said they're supposed to get licensed to be able to do it. Oh, I am sorry, I didn't realize my time was called. But thank you for this dialogue. I really appreciate it. And thank you, Madam Chair, for the indulgence.
Thank you so much, Senator Francis Heyliger. I'm trying to be very lenient today. Senator Francis Heyliger, you are recognized for your 4 minutes.
Good afternoon to my colleagues. Good afternoon to the testifiers. Good afternoon to the people of this territory. As I sit here and I listen to all the positive testimony, it was a bit heartwarming to hear all the things that our former governor was able to do during his tenure. One of the things that I have to do as a senator is represent both sides of the spectrum. And while I was here in the chambers, I was going back and forth because my office was inundated with phone calls. I got phone calls in support. I got phone calls not in support. As we, as a public, heard about this piece of legislation and I read it, I saw the positive things, but when we're going to be discussing these types of things, we also have to look from both sides of the spectrum, and that is what I want to talk about a little bit today. For me, I have to listen to everyone. And in listening to everyone, while some come to me and say, we support this piece of legislation because former Governor DeYoung did a great job with Diageo And because of that, all the monies that came in is what is helping us today. But then the other side of my constituents say, well, it was a lousy deal because we gave away too much. And as I sit here and I read this 60-page document that came from the Inspector General's office 10 days ago as to the Vital deal, which happened under his administration, which is a very, very scathing report. I wonder, because in speaking to constituents, again, one half says you can't blame him for that. He's not a member of the board. But the other half says it happened under his administration. He dropped the ball. And I could talk about many other things where we had both positive and we had negative situations. We could talk about the guardhouse. We had a situation where our revised Organic Act says he's supposed to live at up at Government House. Unfortunately, it wasn't set up for a family. So you have half the community saying he had every right to repair his personal home, to make sure him and his family was secure. And then you have the other half saying, no, he didn't. And when you live in a community where one individual is such a interesting conversation where you see the good and you see the other side, it puts us as legislators in some very interesting positions to make these types of decisions. Now, I'm going to put on the record my personal view as it relates to the promenade. I personally would like to see it named after a veteran. And that is what I would like to see. And that is what I would like to push and support. And I'm going to make my decision accordingly, because as we continue this tradition of naming things after individuals, I love tradition. But sometimes when situations are occurring and we're smack dead in the middle of them, you know, it gives you pause at times. I listen to the constituents speak. As you know, nationally, we talk about this Epstein case that's currently happening, that just started yesterday with Ms. Maxwell. And all the reports that are tying in to this government, and some things happened during a specific administration. And we're all looking at that. EDA contract signed off on during a same administration time period, where I think the benefits at times for us to get the types of money into this territory is a good thing. But then you have some of the community questioning, why are some things done in a specific way? So while I see the positive, and I do hear some of what both sets of my constituents are saying, I have to make up my mind as to whether this is either the best time or the best location. Because for me, I am still going to say I would prefer that promenade to be named after a veteran. Thank you so much for the time, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much, Senator Frances Heyliger.